Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. So in my previous video that I posted, I spent quite a bit of time talking about this truck, telling the history of it, and I had mentioned a few projects that I wanted to do on this thing in the future. Well, that's what we're here for in this video, is to get started on some of those projects. Now, for those of you that saw that video or have seen this truck in previous video, you probably already noticed that there's something a little different going on here. And that is the fact that the hood now has color on it. Now, stemming from the previous video, I'd mentioned that it had been several years that that project had been done in stage 2, and I still hadn't gotten around to painting the hood. Well, I decided the other day that that was not going to be the case anymore. I wanted to get the hood done. So I got a couple time-lapse videos, but I really didn't get in depth on the whole painting process because I have done that before on this channel. If you're interested to see a little bit more on how I painted the hood, go look at the video where I painted the wheels for the monster truck. It's the same process. We just did it on aluminum here. So Allison and I did go ahead and pull the hood off this truck day before yesterday. Took it off in pieces. You can actually pull the pins out of the hinge on each hood side, and then we could actually lift the hood off of the truck in 3 separate pieces. Got them set up on stands over by the paint booth, and then we just went to town with some Scotch-Brite and some 400 grit sandpaper. Now, after getting the hood panels and everything off and a little bit of Scotch-Brite work, I did do a couple of test shoots with the air cleaner panels there. Once I confirmed that I could probably get it close enough to the same color and finish, I went ahead and continued with the sanding. Lots of elbow grease with the 400 grit, and then smoothed it up with some red Scotch-Brite around the rivet areas. And then it was a super simple scuff and shoot. I just hit it with some etcher primer and then base coat, clear coat. Now, as far as the color and the finish and everything there, this is the same, like a gunmetal gray factory Ford color that they've been using since the late 90s. It's the same color as what I originally shot the truck with. However, I've been through 3 batches of this color since the original, cans of paint that I started with on this project. Now, the test pieces on the air cleaner panels kind of showed that the color was going to be close enough, but the biggest thing was the clear coat finish. So when I did the cab years and years ago, 13 years ago, when Cliff and I shot the cab on this truck, I used a product that is called Hot Rod Flats. And it's just a clear coat with a flattening agent in it. And it's pretty flat. When I had the hood panels built for the top section, and then I built the new side panels here, I had actually ordered up another gallon kit of Hot Rod Flats clear coat. However, since the last video, I noticed that this truck has been running in this configuration for 7 years now. So that can of clear coat has been sitting on the shelf for 7 years here. I did dig it out and open the lid on it, but anything that could settle out of that clear, as far as probably any solids and any of the flattening agents, have definitely settled out of it. It is like a waxy substance that is about half the depth of that can of clear coat. I tried to mix it in a little bit with a stir stick, but it doesn't look like there's a lot of hope for that gallon of clear. So I set it to the side, drug out the other stuff that I've been using for the monster truck, which is a Finish 1. It's an Acme product, and it is more of a satin finish clear coat, not flat. But I went ahead and shot it with that stuff anyway. Needless to say, the finish is a little bit different. The hood and the air cleaner panels are a little bit more, I guess they have a little more shine to them. They're not quite as flat. All in all, I think give it a couple of years running down the road and a couple of wash jobs, it'll probably dull out and be close enough. I'm pretty particular about my stuff for the most part, but when it comes to a 2-day paint project like this thing here, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. Now, I would like to take a minute really quick and mention that if you pay really close attention to the paint job on Midnight Panic, you'll notice that the front clip on that truck is actually a little bit duller. It's not quite as shiny as everything from the doors back on the truck. So the doors and the cab and the bed sides are a little bit shinier. And what happened there was I shot the cab and doors first. And when I shot those parts, I did not mix that clear coat, the gallon of clear. It's in more of a jug that you pour out. And now normally you get a straight clear coat, no flattening agents, nothing like that. You usually don't have to mix the clear coat up much. Well, I didn't think about that. You know, I grabbed up this gallon can of satin finish clear coat and I didn't really mix it. So I shot those first components and they ended up with a little bit less flattening agent in it. Now, the paint on that truck is definitely satin finish. It is not shiny by any means. But what happened was when I got to the next batch of components, the next batch of parts to paint, which were the hood and the front fenders, I had recognized my mistake and I ended up mixing up that clear coat quite a bit. And all that did actually was get more flattening agent in the clear when I painted those parts. So if you look at Midnight Panic, the front fenders are considerably more flat and almost, it makes the front of the truck look almost a different color than the cab and bedsides. But I guess it fits now because the front of this truck is shinier than the back half. So I guess they're a pair that were meant to be. Now that is one of the projects that I'd mentioned I wanted to get done. So we're gonna mark that one finished. I'm really actually pretty happy with how the thing looks. The next thing that I want to take on is actually the HVAC stuff in the sleeper. I mentioned that I wanted to do heat and AC. But what I had mentioned in the previous video was I wanted to tie into the existing heating and AC circuit. So I mentioned I had a big condenser up here in the front of the truck, a 7-piston Sandon compressor, and I basically wanted to set it up like an old E350 van. So that system, Ford runs one compressor, a big condenser, and they just tee the lines, and then you have a front and rear evaporator, front and rear controls. I was gonna do something along those lines for the sleeper here, and then the same with the heater. So the heater, I was actually going to just tie into a set of heating valves. I have a set of valves on the engine itself for the rear. I was just gonna tie into that and make it so that the rear would be on its own system and have heat and AC. Allison can control that when she's sitting in the back of the sleeper there. However, since that video, I've changed my mind. And the biggest reason for that is I think it might be better if I could have the sleeper itself completely independent from the truck. There's a couple of reasons for that, and I'll try to go over those. But for the most part, what I want to do is an AC system. It's basically like a mini split. So a lot of guys that are running over the road are installing these little 12-volt mini split systems in their sleepers. And the reason they're doing it is they'll park their truck overnight and they can run this independent AC system off of a battery bank on their truck. And that AC unit can run throughout the night or through most of the night, and their truck doesn't have to run for them to have cool air in the sleeper. Now that makes sense. I don't need that myself. I need this to basically just cool that box when we're running down the road. Now I've dug into these 12-volt AC systems a little bit. There's quite a few people that have doubts of how efficient they are or how well they're gonna work. I don't really have any intentions of this being a primary AC system. The one that is in the truck is still the primary AC, the vintage air unit that runs off the compressor on the engine, the condenser up front. That does a pretty fair job of keeping the cab itself comfortable. What's going on is there's no air movement back to the sleeper. So Allison gets a bit warm in there, especially in the warmer summer months when we're traveling down the road. There's just no air moving through that crawlway into the sleeper. So if I put an independent cooling system or AC system in the sleeper itself, it's more of just a supplemental AC. It's just to kind of help, you know, overall in the truck. So my thoughts are I want to set up the external unit where a lot of those guys actually hang them on the back of the sleeper. I want to set that up underneath the bottom floor of the sleeper. You know, it's that external unit has got the compressor, a condenser, a 12-volt fan, and then whatever controls it. It's got some electrical controls in that box as well. So my plan is to mount that up underneath the bottom of the sleeper, and then it's got the internal unit, which mounts in the cab somewhere. Most of the guys that are using that setup are mounting it on the back wall. Well, in a 30-inch sleeper, you don't really have room for anything on the back wall, especially centered where a guy probably would want it. So my thought is we'll mount that internal unit underneath the seat with the vents themselves, you know, where the cooler air is going to come out to where Allison can adjust it to blow out from underneath the seat. from what I can tell and just eyeballing stuff, there looks to be plenty of room both under the sleeper for the external unit and under the seat for the internal unit. And we'll have to punch a hole through the floor to run a couple of AC lines. I think it'll be fairly straightforward to get it set up and really shouldn't take a whole lot of time. Now for the heater, you know, your typical heater system, the way it works, just uses engine coolant to heat up a core, and a fan blows through the core, warming up the area that you're trying to heat. Now I was gonna do something along those lines. I actually had you know, a heater core. It's a really cool old piece that I was gonna use, but I decided that we're just not gonna use the engine to heat the sleeper. I'm gonna use one of those Chinese diesel heaters. So we've got one of those in the trailer. It's been in there as long as we've been running the trailer. That has to be about 5 years now. 4 or 5 years we've been using our big race trailer. And it has one of those little Chinese diesel heaters in it. And it works really well for, you know, that thing being as poorly insulated and a big steel box or a big metal box for the most part. That little diesel heater does a pretty fair job. I also have one that I roll around here in the shop. It's more of the self-contained suitcase type unit. And I actually use that thing to heat smaller areas. Like if I'm working in the machine shop and that's all I'm gonna do is, you know, assembling an engine or doing machine work, and I'm not out in the rest of the shop area for the most part, I have that thing set up so I can point the hot air outlet into the machine room, and it does a really good job of heating that area. So what I've decided to do is buy another one of those Chinese diesel heaters, and we're gonna mount it up underneath the sleeper along with the external portion of the AC unit. And then we're just gonna duct that hot air into the sleeper itself. Now, the reason for that, one, we're running a diesel truck. We have 200 gallons of diesel fuel on here. So why not take advantage of being able to use a little bit of that? Granted, engine cooling, you know, the engine coolant, that's free for the most part. I mean, you're burning diesel fuel to move down the road, you're creating heat. That is free for the most part. But one thing about the diesel heater, if you've noticed, there's a lot of times we leave early in the morning. You know, when I went and got the International Transstar here a couple of months ago, I left the shop here at about 4 o'clock in the morning. There's been times where we head out for races or events. We will leave early. You know, we'll get up at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning and hit the road. Now you get going down the road, depends on what direction we go. If we head west from here, we could be, you know, nearly 15 miles down the road before the inside of the truck is really starting to get comfortable. You know, it just takes a little while to build some heat. Now, if we head east, we get on the freeway and immediately start pulling about 3 miles of grade. So within a few miles, the truck is already making really good heat. Now, if with the diesel heater itself though, I could fire that thing up the night before and the inside of this truck could be 70 degrees before we even get here. So I think that would be very advantageous to have that option. So now that I've pretty much blabbered through the first 5 minutes of this video, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take you over the other side of the shop. I've got all of these parts that I've already ordered up. I've got them out of the box. We'll take a look at some of these parts that we're gonna get put in the truck here and then get started on it. Now, as we wander over here to this side of the shop, as you can see, I've got stuff laid out here on the table. Not in any particular order. This is just how it came out of the box. This is the external unit for the AC. As you can see, it's pretty simple. There's an AC condenser in there, a fan that'll pull air over it, a couple of fittings, and there's a compressor in here. Now, looking into this a little bit, there are some kits that actually, you know, they specifically mention that this unit here can be mounted in any orientation, whether it be vertical, flat, like on a roof, like this right here, or flipped over the other way. I don't know, this particular unit here does not specify being able to mount it any direction. I just personally don't see any reason that I couldn't. Now, if you look at I think they call this a scroll style compressor, and the way it's in there, obviously these are the mounting bolts for it, and it will be hanging on this plate. So I was a bit curious about that. I dug into it a little bit, and the style compressor that is in there, you can actually get those with mounting feet, so it can be mounted horizontally. So I don't think the operation of the compressor will be hindered being mounted in this orientation. but it is a little bit of a question. So I'm going to be paying attention to that. Over here is the part for the internal. This is mounted inside the cabin. Comes with a remote, some paperwork, some hardware. Nothing too special. I guess I would prefer this was black, but I guess since it's under the seat, it's not a big deal. It is definitely a pretty nice plastic piece. I don't think I would risk trying to paint that thing and have anything really stick to it. It'll be fine as is. Obviously got hookups for the AC line, electrical, nothing too special there. Again, this piece is designed to be mounted vertically. If I can get my fingers under it, like so. The only issue I can see with this being mounted horizontally is the drain. So I think I will be popping this cover off and see if there's going to be a way I can put a drain maybe out the bottom. I don't know, I'll have to dig into that a little bit. Then we move over here to the Chinese diesel heater. As you can see, this is not a very big unit. It's not very big at all. So you've got an intake and an exhaust, and then fuel inlet. This unit here is going to be mounted outside, and then you have your air intake. And all this is doing is heating up a chamber with diesel fuel, pulls air in here, blows it over the heat sink, the heat element in here, and blows the hot air out this way. So there's multiple options for ducting and vents. You know, you come out here, split it 2 ways. One thing I was disappointed when I got this one was this ducting that it comes with. This looks like, I mean, it looks almost like paper. Looks like if that got wet, it could be junk in short order. However, I do have some from the other diesel heaters that I have. There's more of just a aluminum paint, maybe painted aluminum. I don't know. It seems a little bit more robust. Maybe it's not as well insulated. I'm not sure. And then the other components, just air intake stuff, muffler and exhaust, fuel line. This is the actual injector. They call it a pump, but it works more like an injector. And then wiring, hardware. It's all pretty simple stuff. I think my main focus to start with will be getting this big unit mounted underneath the sleeper. And then this unit here, I think we're going to have to build a mount that bolts to the bottom of the sleeper that this actually kind of fits inside of. I think what I'll do next is roll under the truck on a creeper, and we'll see if I can get you guys a look at the area we're working with here. So we can kind of peek up above the fuel tanks under the sleeper here, and you can see just to the top of the frame rail up to the floor here, it's looking about like 8 inches minimum. And then there's really not a whole bunch. I do believe there's a cross member in here somewhere. It would have the carrier bearing. So drive line height is going to be considerably lower. There's actually quite a bit of room in this area right in here. But I'm looking to mount everything between the frame rails inside there. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to show you anything under the truck, but we'll give it a whirl here. You can see the top of the cross member there. That would be probably our only limiting factor. And there's lots of room from that cross member up here to the floor of the sleeper. So I think a couple of angle iron brackets sitting on top of this lip right here, over to the same here. If I have 2 of them running front to back and make it so that I can actually bolt that external unit for the AC and just have it hang down here. Maybe kick it off to the driver's side a bit and have enough room for the diesel heater to hang in right here. We'll take a look at that next.
The next day.
All right, well, I've got most of the major components for this project all mounted up in here. This project took a little longer than I anticipated. I was thinking a couple of hours to get these parts all mounted in the truck, and I'm working on the better part of 2 days now. So I'm gonna see if I can get you guys in there and take a look at what I've got done, kind of explain what's going on and how I'm gonna continue on with it. So as we roll onto the truck here, I'm sure that I'm not gonna be able to get you guys a good view, but we're gonna try anyway. So right here you can see the exterior unit is mounted underneath the floor of the sleeper. And I'd actually intended on mounting this unit and the heater under here. But as you can see, when you actually start getting parts put in place, you know, stuff like plumbing and wiring takes up more room than, you know, you kind of really plan for. However, there's just some angle strut material there that's bolted to the main frame itself, actually, of the sleeper. And then those little strut pieces are bolted to the back of the exterior unit. It's all pretty simple. The plumbing comes out from under the floor right there. Get some light up there. Yep. So those are your AC lines that come through the floor of the sleeper itself. And then they loop around the back of the exterior unit and then obviously go in to their respective locations back here. I did end up actually cutting like 4 or 5 feet off of these hoses. And then I just split the crimp unit off of each coupler, removed it, and then I used these kind of more of a DIY AC clamp. Those were actually used to be really easy to get from places like Vintage Air. You can still buy them, but it's just not very common to get those parts anymore. Usually I think most companies expect you to fit the fittings, get your hoses cut, and then take them into, you know, your local auto parts store, somebody that can crimp hydraulic fittings or AC lines and then get them crimped. This here is a lot better deal. In my opinion, you just have a bunch of those in your toolbox, and the special crimper pliers, they work pretty good. So anyway, you can see I've got this wiring here actually goes to, it's supposed to go to the interior unit. It's not going anywhere. It's just laying on top of the fuel tank right now. That will be routed much cleaner later on. And then this is the main power wire, and it's just rolled up right here. So that's what I will show you next. And the reason that it's rolled up and laying right there is because this is the battery box, and I have a hot power feed coming out of the box right up to a power lug in the floor of the truck. So this wire here, basically all it does is feed the amplifiers, stereo stuff in the truck. And then you can see that wire right there actually just tees into this pass-through lug. And it actually goes back to a box in the frame rail that is just for trailer wiring. So it feeds the relays for the trailer lights, your charge wire, stuff like that. So there's really not a big load on this cable here. So I'm going to tie into that lug with that wiring when I get that far along. On the topic of batteries and wiring, currently I have 3 batteries in the battery box, and that seems to be plenty to run the truck. Everything works good there, but I have room for a 4th battery, and I think I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. And then I want to set that battery up on just a constant duty relay. That way it can actually feed, that battery by itself can actually feed the heater and the AC and not draw on the truck when it's not running. So in short, you'll be able to shut the truck off. The 3 batteries that it runs on currently will be isolated from the 1 battery. That way, say you want to run into Walmart for 10 minutes and go get something, you could leave either the heater or the AC running in the sleeper while you're in there doing some shopping just real quickly. Now let's step over to the other side of the truck and I'll show you what's going on inside the sleeper itself, because I have the interior unit mounted as well. I've made some changes there, so we'll go over that. I don't know if the lighting might be too much here. That's a little better. So as you can see, this is where the lines pass through the floor here. Go to your expansion valve and then the interior unit. So the interior unit is originally designed to mount with this surface here against the back wall, so vertically. This would be your drain line. So what I ended up doing was taking this whole unit apart, pulled the evaporator out of it, and I was able to drill a hole in the bottom of this plastic tray. And then I drilled a hole through the floor, and it's just inside of this location. I drilled the hole through the floor at a 1/2 inch diameter hole, and then actually put a flared piece of stainless tubing through the carpet and the plywood, through the aluminum in the bottom. And then the hole that is actually in the plastic here is just a 3/8 hole. So it can actually drip the frozen condensation when it thaws out. It can drip that down into the pan. The pan will collect it, and then it will drip out that 3/8 hole into kind of that little stainless steel funnel where it'll run out the floor. Got pretty lucky with how this thing was constructed, and it has that, it has that option to keep that water from, trying to leak out somewhere else in the box. There was one little low spot where the evaporator sits in here at an angle that I was a little bit concerned might let that leak out somewhere else. So when I put the evaporator back in it, I just put a little dab of silicone in there. That should be good. And then another change I made, this open hole right here is where the controller for this was at. So all of your push buttons for your temperature, your fan speed, all of that stuff was actually just had two little tabs. You could push them in and pull that controller out of there. Well, after I got to looking at it, the only wiring that goes to this box from the controller is the fan wiring, obviously for your fan speeds. It's just a power and a ground to the fan motors. And then there is a temperature sensor, a little sensor that goes on the evaporator, and then it hooks up to the controller. So what I've got going on right here is these wires that are bundled up. I've actually soldered those onto that temperature sensor, and they're just laying there waiting to hook up to the controller. And then I put a Deutz 2-pin Deutz connector on the fan blower motor, and it's just laying down in there too. So this open void actually just works like these vents here. They go into the case in the inlet side of the blower motor. So this is just allowing air to come in here. So everything fits under the seat. It's kind of snug, but the way you can open these vents here, it should be able to actually blow forward and out from under the seat. And then another thought was, if no one's riding in the sleeper, I could fold the seats up just like this and actually point those vents right up there into the back of the cab. So I guess next I'll set you guys up. I'll go around to the other side of the sleeper and fold this seat down. So the lock for the seat is actually on that side. I'll go flip this seat down and you can see how everything here is actually tucked up nice behind the seat or under the seat. As we fold the seat down here, you can see everything tucked back in. Shouldn't have any issues with anybody stomping on that thing or kicking it. Also, while you're there and I'm over here, you can see I've got some aluminum mounted in here. I've got a handful of pieces attached. So what I'm going to build next is a Lexan control panel that's going to fasten in here, and it's going to block off and separate this area right here from the rest of the sleeper. So it's on the table now. We'll go take a look at it, but the goal is to make that control panel so that everything that controls the AC and the heater, everything will be right here. And then I'm going to put a top on here, probably maybe 5/8 or 3/4 inch plywood. I've got some material to cover that with. And then that will make a nice little shelf, I guess you could call it. Little place that Allison could set up her laptop, where you can throw your phone, any device, whatever, can sit right there. This panel's also going to have some power ports, USB chargers, 12-volt chargers, stuff like that. I've got it laid out. So anyway, I'll bring you guys over here, show you the heater setup, then we'll go look at this panel that I'm going to build. And back over here on this side of the sleeper, about the last thing that I got mounted as far as major components go is this Chinese diesel heater here. So I had mentioned that I originally wanted to mount this between the frame rails with the exterior unit of the AC. As I pointed out, it's just getting tight under there to try and mount that unit in there. I had considered mounting it right here on the outside of the frame rails. I could use a couple of those bolts to build like a tray or a little box or something to mount it in here, and then just duct the heated air into the sleeper itself. However, I decided to go ahead and mount it in this area, since this portion of the sleeper is going to be basically boxed off from the occupant area. Another thing that I've heard about with these diesel heaters is it's a good idea to actually recirculate the air. So the air that you're pulling in to heat through this unit, and then this ducts back into that area. I've read, and that's what they say on most of the videos on these things, is to recirculate that air. So you're going to just pull air from that area, heat it, push it back into that area. So what I'm going to do, where the control panel is going to go in here, that Lexan panel, it's actually going to have vents right here to be able to pull air from the area that the occupant area, heat it, and then it will be ducted back in right here. If I decide to experiment a little bit and pull, air from outside, I'll be able to block these vents off and then maybe pour it through the sleeper somewhere so it can draw exterior, outside air to heat. And then you could pressurize the cabin with heated air. Probably overthinking that a bit, but it's pretty simple to do, something to try out. Now this area here wasn't really used too much anyway. Obviously you can see the seat is about 15 inches away from the edge of the sleeper. It was kind of convenient to be able to open this door, throw a couple bags in, especially like the snack bags or, coats, hoodies, blankets, stuff like that was pretty simple to be able to throw it in there. However, this is mostly just going to be access to be able to work on this stuff. So now you've got the heater, you'll have the back of the panel as far as the controls, power points, all of that kind of stuff, the ducting. Might be able to do a little bit of storage, emergency type stuff, maybe a first aid kit, fire extinguisher, who knows. There's a little bit of room to store some stuff. It just won't be accessible from inside the sleeper anymore. That's okay with me. We'll still have this door, which now will open to this shelf that's right here. So we'll be able to throw the snack bags, blankets, coats, whatever can go right here on their way into the truck. At least it's still accessible. The other thing about this shelf here is if you have to come out this door in an emergency situation, you've kind of got to step up into it instead of trying to crawl over this extruded aluminum knee biter right here. One other small concern having this thing mounted in the sleeper here or in this area is the noise itself. So these little diesel heaters, they kind of sound like a small jet engine at low idle. They have a little bit of a turbo whistle to them. So if we go over here and take a look at the one that I use to actually heat my machine room from time to time, I don't necessarily always have the exhaust pointed right at that brushy broom. But as you can see, I have it outside the room and then it ducts through the door here into that little vent. Now, even though this thing is outside the room, I can actually hear that little turbo whistle or the little miniature jet engine running through that ducting. I know it's not very far away, but you can specifically hear it through the ducting. So I don't think it would matter if it is sitting here on a cart or if it was mounted on this side of the shop. I think you're still going to hear that resonant sound coming through there. So it really wouldn't matter if this was mounted in the sleeper, under the sleeper, at the back of the truck. I really don't think it matters. You're going to have to deal with that sound. Or whoever's riding in the sleeper is going to have to deal with that sound a little bit. Fortunately, Allison spends a lot of time with her earbuds on and on her phone or touchpad or something. So that little bit of noise, she can deal with that versus having the heat. She would much rather have this heater than silence and no heat. Now, as far as sound and heat, if we take a look underneath the sleeper here, you can see our air inlet and exhaust, and then the fuel feed. That all comes down through the floor of the sleeper here. So I'm going to have to put the small little air filter deal that comes into the air inlet. I'm going to have to mount that up under here. And then these little heaters come with a kind of a little muffler thing. I will probably use the stainless flex tube, route that back one way or another, and mount this here. Somehow, kind of direct that exhaust out from under the sleeper. So now let's go to the other side of the shop where I'm working on the control panel and get started on that. Now, as I was messing around with that interior unit for the AC, I got to noticing that these little tabs right here actually just lock this piece into that, that cover for the AC. And the only thing that's not plugged into it now is that temp sensor goes right here, and then your heater blower motor plugs into these spades right here. So it's pretty easy to remote mount this thing as long as you can get this thing fastened or fixtured into something somewhere. Much the same with the heater control. Got this little guy here. So I've got to figure out how to mount this. I'll have both of those on that control panel. And then I don't have them out here, but those power points, I'll get those fixed in there as well. So what I've got going on here is I've drawn up that panel and actually drew it up in a super simple AutoCAD program. It's basically the drawing program for the plasma cam. Exported it here into the Carbide Create program. And then I've converted it into a cut path for the CNC router table. So these are just PowerPoints. Those are the vents I had mentioned behind the seat area there to pull air in, and then our ducting for the heater to come out. Then these are the control locations. I don't know if I'm going to add any more to that right now, but I do have everything set up here on the CNC router. See if I can get you guys lighting. You can see. So what I've done here is my homemade vacuum table. This is just a piece of MDF that has some grooves and slots machined into it. And then it actually has a kind of a little control valve that I can shut half of the vacuum off. And that's the way it's set up right now. Got a couple of clamps just to keep this thing located in case it loses vacuum. But once I kick the vacuum cleaner on here, it'll suck that thing down tight to the table. And then I can machine whatever I want out of this 1/8" piece of Lexan. So that's the plan. I'm going to build something out of that I can mount all this junk to and bolt it in the sleeper. And then I can start worrying about what I put on top of it.
Thousand years later.
Well, we're back on this project. This is actually a couple of days later, a whole different set of days off. And apparently winter decided to show up this weekend. So I actually have my portable little diesel heater here blowing up my skirt while I work on the sleeper on the inside here. So hopefully my audio isn't too messed up because obviously this thing makes a little bit of noise. But what I'm gonna do right now is flip the camera around and get you guys up to speed with where I'm at in this project and what I still need to do. Since last days off, I have finished the panel here that has all of our AC and heater controls mounted in it. Our charge ports, power, all of that stuff is in that panel. That's all buttoned up, mounted in place. And then obviously I have got the heater removed so that I can have access to it so I can get the wiring done. This is going to be fed with power from a relay. It's controlled by a switch on the panel, and then I will have fused power going to everything. And then I also completed the shelf in here. So this is just a piece of 3/4" plywood. It's cut to size, and then I used 3M77 contact adhesive to glue like a pleather or naugahyde type material to it. And it's actually cut oversized and stretched over the edges and stapled up under the bottom side here. So it looks pretty nice from the other side. I'll get the light, shine it in from the other door so you can see the beauty side. This here is the ugly mechanical side of it. So let's go on the other side of the sleeper and take a look at what I ended up with from the side that you can actually see. And here's what you can see from inside the sleeper. Obviously I have painted that Lexan, and I just used an old trick that I learned back in my Nitro RC days, where you could use the toolbox liner and 2 different colors of paint to get this carbon fiber effect. So it kind of matches the real carbon fiber in the front of the truck. But it's got everything in there that we need. And this is, I think, is going to end up just being a test piece anyway. We might add more stuff back here. I can already tell I would like the charge ports and that power switch and everything to actually be shuffled forward, maybe about an inch. But once we figure out exactly where we want everything and get everything working the way we want, note any changes we might want to make, then I'll probably actually end up buying a real piece of carbon fiber, set that up on the CNC table, and cut a new one out with the changes that we want to make. As far as the top, I'm really happy with how that turned out up there. That should be really pretty nice. You know, Allison can set up her laptop, like I said, her touchpad, throw your phone up there while it's charging. Or if you're sitting in that side of the bench seat here, you've got a nice armrest to sit there. All in all, aside from maybe a couple of changes, you know, location of some of these parts and get rid of the AutoZone carbon fiber in favor of the real stuff, pretty happy with how it all turned out. So today's project is to try and get all of this stuff wired up. I've got to run the main power in from that lug, add a constant duty relay, the 4th battery, get all that stuff mounted in there, run some wiring up here into the sleeper itself. I've put this grommet and a plastic tube through the floor of the sleeper so that I can run a power and a ground up in here. That will feed the relay. The relay will be controlled by the power switch in the panel here, and then it will actually feed power to this fuse box. From there, I can distribute the power, fused power, to all of the components that I want there, as far as the chargers, heater, all of that stuff. Back on the other side, I'm going to have to do the same thing. I've already put the hole in the carpet. I just need to drill the hole through, build another pass-through with that plastic tube and a grommet. This hole here will be used for the wiring that goes to the fuel pump for the heater, and then it will have incoming wire that plugs in for the AC. So I might actually get rid of these spade connectors, this unit here for the AC controls. Probably just cut the ends off of it, add a Deutz connector. That way I can just pass it through here, and it's easy to pin and unpin that connector to get it through a smaller hole. Here you can see our vent through the panel here lines up really nice with that hole through the bottom of the seat. So I will actually be able to run my wiring for the heater control, the blower motor speed control, and then that temperature sensor can come in through one of these slots and go up to that control panel there. Well, I'm sure that's going to be some kind of musical time-lapse montage just to get all of that crammed into this video. I really didn't bring you guys into it, mostly because it's just tedious, boring work. So as you can see, I've got the 4th battery added in here. And while I was at it, I went ahead and redid the battery cables there. The reason for that is the truck, back when it was Cummins powered, I was actually running a pair of 4D batteries in there. So when I swapped it over to Cat Power and built these new battery boxes, I built a really nice battery hold down and cables that worked with the 4D batteries. And that's where all of this stuff come from. So one of the 4D batteries failed. I run this 75-65 battery here and just about everything else on the property. So I just swapped the truck over to that setup. As I said earlier in the video, 3 batteries works fine on here. And this 4th battery is pretty much just for the stuff I've added to the sleeper. So you can see I've also added a constant duty relay right here. And this battery right here is fused to that relay. So this power wire that ties these other 3 batteries into this wire has to go through this relay. And the way it's set up is I had a hot wire, key power wire in the cowl of the truck here, and I just tied into that and run down to control that relay in the battery box. So if you're not draining this battery down, as soon as you kick key power on, it will actually start on all 4 batteries. If you happen to leave the heater or the AC or something on and it kills this battery here, at least you'll have the other 3 to fire the truck up, just like it's always been. Now, if we continue on from this constant duty relay here, this power wire loops through, comes up through a grommet in the box, and then goes up to that pass-through in the bottom of the floor. Now, this wiring here is what I've added for the AC unit, and then just power and ground to the sleeper for any accessories in there. You can see the exterior unit, the AC back up under there. And then if you come up under the sleeper, you've got that power and ground. You can't really see, the lighting's not very good, but it comes up, goes through this tube in the floor. And then we've got the AC control wiring coming in. And then that green line is actually the fuel line for the diesel heater. We've got this exhaust right here, which since I've installed that, somebody has mentioned that having that dip in the exhaust might not be a very good deal. So I'm gonna look into that a little more. I'm not sure if they're worried about condensation collecting in there, or maybe if it gets a rich spot and gets diesel fuel puddling in there, maybe, I'm not sure. I guess if there's any real reason for concern, I could go ahead and drill a little tiny hole in that P-trap right there. And if it's just condensation, then it can drip right down out of there and not be a problem. If it does, in fact, turn out to be diesel fuel puddling in there, then it'll pretty much just drip right here and everyone will think my Freightliner caps are leaking. No big deal there. And then the exhaust just continues on back through the back wall of the sleeper here. Now this spot here was actually, there was a light bolted on there at one time. You can see they'd used a pretty good sized bolt to hold that light on, and it was a little corroded. So actually I didn't really remove that much material from that spot. And it's not like I'm really defacing the sleeper by punching a hole through there. If it's something we go away from later on, it's not hard to bolt the light right back on there and just cover that right up. As you can probably hear the click, click, click and the hum back here, I've actually got the heater running in the sleeper there. So I'll take you around here and show you everything that's installed, how it's installed and whatnot. But I think what we'll do is we'll go get Allison and have her come out, crawl in the sleeper and see what she thinks. It's actually like wicked cold in the shop right now. I would guess it's less than 30 degrees in here. It's super cold. And I haven't had that heater running in there for very long, and it's on the lowest setting. And I poked my head in there and I'm actually kind of concerned it might be too much. We're gonna get her over here, have her jump in there and tell me what she thinks. Hey. What? Come out here and test this sleeper out. Tell me what you think of the heater.
is warm in here.
Gonna be too warm? That's the lowest setting.
The lowest setting? That's crazy. It'll be perfect.
Oh, it's gonna be perfect? You're
Yes.
good with that?
Yes, and my seat's warmed.
Yep.
Yep.
Alrighty. Call it good then.
Good.
Now, as far as the AC, as I'd mentioned, it's about 30 degrees in the building here, and my AC machine is over on the other side of the shop, and I don't really have good access to roll it around in here. So what I'm gonna do is wait for a little nicer day to where I can actually pull the truck out and, you know, pull it up on the apron on the other side of the shop and do it out in warmer weather. Everything is hooked up. I haven't tested anything, but I don't think this weather is very conductive to do any testing with that anyway. Now, if we go in here, we'll look in this cabinet. You can see how it turned out. I'll get a little better light for in there. Nothing really particularly special to see in here. Obviously, I've got the heater hooked up and running. I did get that relay set up in here, and that is just picking up power from that lug underneath the cab. And when you turn this switch on the other side of the panel here, all that does is kick that relay on and supply power to this fuse box. So the first fuse is actually providing power for our charge ports, power points, and then the second fuse is dedicated solely for the diesel heater. And then the third fuse is actually just that underglow lighting that you could see underneath the seat in there. And that's just a little LED ricer to go along with our carbon fiber panel there. And then obviously you can see there's a fourth fuse in there. There's nothing hooked up, but it's nice to have extra keyed power if you want, or extra switched power in here for something we may add later. As for now, all that's doing is holding a spare fuse if we need it. There's really nothing special. All the wiring is, you know, that's where it comes up through the floor for the AC and the fuel injector wiring for the diesel heater. This here is all that stuff I had to add back. The blower, yeah, this is the AC blower motor, power and ground, and then this is AC control stuff. Everything over here is just heater stuff. It's really fairly sparse in there. There's not a lot going on, which is fine. I guess I can throw a couple of spare Peterbilt parts in there, maybe some air brake parts or a D2 or a governor or something like that. What I'm gonna do next is actually put this truck back together. So I'd actually taken that glove box panel out so that I could get access to wiring stuff. So you can kind of see what's going on in there. Lots of heater and AC crap. And this glove box piece is quite the contraption to duct that heater air and whatnot out that vent. So I'm going to clean this thing up, get it stuffed back in there, get the truck itself all put back together. And I've got to put this air cleaner panel back on. By popping them 3 bolts out, it's a lot easier to get back in there and do that wiring stuff. So probably put you guys back on time lapse, and I'm going to put this thing back together. Well, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this video. I apologize for not being able to wrap up the whole installation with the AC and everything. It's just a little bit too cold to get that thing all charged and actually do any testing with it. However, the heater seems to work really good, maybe too good. And we're going to get to actually test that out my next days off, because we're actually going to take Midnight Panic to Klamath Falls, Oregon for a monster truck show. So that will be the next video. We're going to be doing some content, more show content, and we'll see how that goes. We'll get started with 2026 monster truck season, and hopefully you guys will follow along with that. As always, thanks for watching. Have a good one. So I had pulled the dash panel out, that piece that has the glove box in it. Man, you guys can't see shit.